If salary wasn't a consideration, what is the most attractive profession? Write in the comments what you think about it. What's the most attractive job without considering the money? Enjoy the show. Story 1. In a broad definition, stay-at-home mom with multiple children, dogs and reptiles. In a more narrow definition, my current job in clinical research, but focused on pediatric cancer or more neurology. The job itself is great. It satisfies my scientific curiosity and I get to travel internationally, but not all indications are equally interesting. Story 2. I have always felt pretty icked by reception work, as oftentimes you are the underpaid shit kicker of the company down at the very bottom. But I think if it paid like $120K a year, I'd be all over it and killing it, and wouldn't consider it a job you avoid at all costs if you don't live with a breadwinner who understands how underpaid you are. Story 3. Look, I usually interpret this as what broke job is fun, but for some reason my brain today said, if money didn't exist, and all your needs were met regardless of how bad you sucked at your job, what would you dare to try to be? And my brain was like, obviously a film director, which never crossed my mind before. So now I am having like the world's chillest existential crisis. Story 4. I'd set up a team that clipped snips from semi-popular broadcasters on Twitch or Afrikta and give them like professional level edits. Then donate the final product back for them to watch. Of course, speed would be the name of the game, not top quality, but I'd hope to make ourselves known for having a meme license. Story 5. Whatever they are passionate about. In my brain, that usually defaults to a skill, like a hobby-turned-profession sort of situation. Woodworking, welding, ceramics, outdoor guide, glass blowing, video game design, whatever it is. Seeing someone be passionate about their craft and do it well is such a turn-on. Caveat for me personally, though, it has to be mostly tangible. A craft that produces something in most instances. Sorry if you're super passionate about stocks or banking or something like that. Too dry for me. Story 6. So this is going to sound dumb or corny or something, but I was reading through people's responses and a lot of them sounded good. I tried thinking about what it is I find attractive in men, and intelligence has always been something I found attractive. Yeah, the physical aspect is important, but I've never held a serious relationship with someone I couldn't talk to and discuss things with. Similarly, confidence is another big one for me, as it is for most people. I was trying to think of what jobs fit those discounting the pay scale. And really, I just thought if money weren't an option, I think watching someone do whatever it is they love would be the most attractive. People who don't like their jobs are miserable. As long as you're doing something you love, it's not work, and you're a million times happier and more confident. So I think that would be the most attractive thing. Not really a specific profession, just something you love to do. Something you're passionate about and gives you joy. Yeah, I know it's kind of a dumb answer, but whatever, there it is. Story 7. One of the most enjoyable jobs for me was a concierge. If it wasn't for the salary, I would have probably retired after that job. No supervisor or management watching over your shoulder. Managing the whole apartment complex and its residents are your responsibility. Behind a desk/office most of the time, work at your own pace, but ensure that daily tasks were complete. Honestly, it was the best job that I ever had. Low stress and self-management. I got to make connections and rapport with tenants, which I found really fulfilling. The current job I have is in government enforcement, high stress, long hours, and high responsibilities. I did a 24-hour shift yesterday, and it has fatigued me to where I will take a few days to recuperate. I don't have a steady gym routine or diet because I am on call and doing 18-plus-hour days weekly. The job is also highly risky, carrying firearms and dealing with confronting situations on a daily basis. Your alert levels and situational awareness has to be supported by a caffeine addiction. Story 8. Long-haul airline pilot, which requires very few hours and pays really well too. The only problem is you need to put down about $300K to get the required 1,500 hours and a bunch of training, or you need to do some really poorly paid and moderately dangerous flying to get the hours before you reach retirement. If you flew for the Air National Guard, which gets the most flying hours of any military aviation branch, you'd take around 13 years to get the 1,500 hours, but Congress trusts military training better than flying a Cub with no electrical system, so they actually only need a few years. Story 9. I've often thought that if I was ever independently wealthy, I would start a nonprofit and work on stuff which I thought would be good for society, but would not necessarily be profitable. For example, I'd love to work on a site to improve election education and information availability in general, to try to get better election outcomes. That doesn't lend itself to profit, and/or trying to be profitable probably impacts the ability to do that well. But I think it would be good for society, and I'd like to do something like that. See also, building a better land-based clean energy transportation system as a better alternative to public transport efforts, etc. I have a lot of projects which I would love to do if I had sufficient resources, and that wasn't a concern. Story 10. I've never had a second in my life without the constant fear of money, but in my side I would say, I would be a carpenter or some electronics repairman with his own lab. In fact, if I ever win a lottery, I would buy a house with a dedicated room to do this kind of things. Most likely, I will end up dying with half a house being paid. I haven't even started a mortgage yet and in debt, so it is what it is. Story 11. Honestly, I would go back to manual labor if they can't hold pay PTO over my head. They can't make me work 60, 92-hour work weeks. Was an assembly mechanic, a chemical compounder, and in construction for most of my life, all jobs between 3-7 years. I enjoyed the work, just hated how we were treated. I work it now 100x easier, takes half the skill, double the pay, benefits. But man, my body craves to actually work during my time of work so I can truly rest during my time of rest. Story 12. I'm a biochemist and work in diagnostics, R&D, and I really like my job. Believe that what I'm doing by furthering medical science along is a noble use of my time here on Earth, and am thankful to have been born with the smarts to do what I do. But my most selfish dream is to be a dog trainer. I would love to make a living as a dog trainer, nothing calls me more. Story 13. Snail counting. I used to work with a whole group of people in Hawaii that had to check on endangered plants and animals behind the artillery ranges on the bases in Hawaii. One guy's job was to hike a couple hours up some mountains to a roped-off area. He'd park us down below and climb up to the area the snails were, and then he'd pull out his binoculars and lay on the ground and count snails. After a rousing day of snail counting, we'd all pack up and hike back down the mountains, and that was it for my part of it. But I can't think of anything cooler than getting paid to hike up a mountain and count some snails a couple of days a week. Story 14. I always thought a Michelin inspector dishing out the stars would be a great gig, whatever the salary or expenses situation. Lots of travel just to eat amazing food in amazing places, anonymously. Problem is, you have to have been a top hospitality pro for many years to build up the kudos, and apparently the schedule can be pretty nuts. Story 15. I'd love to run a small bar with a food truck, but the margins are so tight and the lack of a work-life balance makes this extremely not appealing or open an education-themed restaurant around growing food and supply chain. Basically, it is a restaurant on a small farm where you can take a certain number of reservations that take a tour, pick their food, and harvest any taihing from a fish farm animals to be used in the moon. Story 16. Personally speaking, choir director teacher. The reason it's not attainable for me is because teach both don't get paid well, and also because you're required to have a degree to prove you know what you're doing. I'm a bit out of practice, but after a week of relearning everything, I could probably tell you chord progressions for everything I listen to along with proper ways to notate them. Even before I went to college for vocal music education, I was writing down songs I liked and finding ways to perform them a cappella with a group of friends. It was a blast. Obviously, it's not something a ton of people want to do, but if money wasn't needed, I could easily go back and do that. There's nothing more I'd like to do with my life than share my love of music with anybody that wants to hear it. Story 17. If video stores were still a thing, or I could go back to working in a video store, I'd do it in a second. Being an arbiter of culture, seeing movies for free, getting to know the tastes of regulars and setting them up with some weird niche film they're going to love, hunting for movies that have that guy with the hair, I think it has something to do with color, and maybe it was set in the 60s, maybe, all that stuff. All day, every day. Loved it. Story 18. Software architect. Planning and solving software logistics is extremely satisfying. It's like a whodunit based on some obscure client description, and you nail it down piece by piece until you have something that, given the information at hand, seems like it could work. Bonus dopamine points if the client is able to tell you what they actually want. But that's just wishful thinking. Story 19. I'd return to activism, policy work, and organizing. This time I'd focus on Medicare for all or ecological restoration, or both. I'd help orgs with their computer stuff full-time. Instead of just volunteering, I'd do urban forest restoration full-time. This is my current side hustle, volunteer work. Just one event per week and missy time on admin and organizing. I'd work on my open-source software projects full-time. In other words, I'd be very busy. Instead of wasting my life doing bullshit work, trading my time for money. Story 20 Fiber Art. I love everything from sheep to finished product, and I've taught it and sold finished products, but it isn't lucrative because they have machines to do most of the wool processing and knitting and slave child labor to do the crochet. People don't want to pay the cost of a living wage, or even minimum wage, or even just materials, for an item when they can buy at Walmart for $5. If I could just sit in my garden all day drinking tea, listening to audiobooks, and spinning or knitting, I would be so happy. Story 21. As a teen, I kinda loved being a lifeguard swimming instructor. I was also on the early shift and acted as the pool maintenance guy, checking the chemicals, adjusting the chlorine, even cleaning out the change room or hosing off the deck wasn't all that bad. I loved teaching the kids to swim and working on my tan, saving the occasional life or patching up a cut. Honestly, just an awesome job. All except the no money part. Story 22. I cut grass on a golf course in summer. The course is closed in winter, so then I work on ski lifts. There's bad days with both jobs, I don't make much, plus where I live is wild expensive. But fuck me sitting cutting fairways and greens in the sun from 0600. 1400, then having all afternoon to hike, run, or booze is excellent. Skiing to and from work and getting fresh lines and a free ski pass also rocks. Top tip, do odd jobs for the local bar owner and get your drinks covered. If you're lucky like I am, she will also throw you a few of her mates from time to time. Story 23 Tutor. This was my part-time job in high school and college. You get to do a lot of the fun parts of teaching, feeling helpful, seeing kids grow and learn, talking through a wide range of interesting topics, without the hard, unpleasant part of teaching, lesson planning, grading, etc. In general, people are nice and appreciative, and never get mad at you about the material or argue with you about their grades. It's also just much easier to help someone understand when you can talk one-on-one, figure out where they're stuck, and tailor explanations to the way they think. So it's easier to be a good tutor than a good teacher. It's probably the job that made me the happiest, but I only ever spent a few hours doing it each week, and it definitely wouldn't pay enough to live on. Story 24, just my personal opinion. For a woman, teacher, nurse, animal-related jobs, or something that shows them being happy, which is attractive. All jobs that have a care side to it are generally attractive. For a man, mechanic, technician, trade-related job, also job that shows someone being happy, which is also attractive to people. Working as a mechanic technician, you learn the basics to most trades and are very handy overall, and I feel that's generally an attractive quality. Story 25, helping people or animals. Working at an animal shelter or a food bank or something would probably be really fulfilling. Teaching. But there's other things aside from completely shit pay that also make it unattractive, but it's still really rewarding. If pay was acceptable, it would make other aspects far more tolerable. Other things in education. Zoos or animal sanctuaries, state parks, working at the library. Story 26. Realistically, a profession that is basically what people do on vacation, but that you do not have to provide service to the public. My choice would be National Park Ranger. A close second would be Fish and Game Warden. Now, I must add one more that might be controversial. I am in very good shape, very fit as an endurance athlete. I'm also really sex positive, so I'd say porn star is on my list. Not working for someone else, though. I, and my partner, would be in charge. Also gotta add Anthony Bourdain's last job. Travel the world, chatting people up, and eating great food. Miss him. Story 27. I would love to go back to working at the bookstore I worked at for 15 years. Talked books and other culture all day with employees and customers. Shelving and making displays look good is very zen and calming. The kind of customer who walks into a bookstore is usually less annoying than other retailers. They just want to know what's good or what's new, and we were happy to give them our opinions or even enter into some debate at times. I left in 2010 because you simply just couldn't make a living if you lived by yourself on a regular employee's salary. You would need to be a store manager to make any kind of dent. Story 28 Wine, work at something called Lebe und Seele in Germany, and we basically distribute groceries and other useful stuff to people in need. It's great, it's super fun, relaxed, and many disabled people use working there as a starting point to get back into the actual work market. The pay is non-existent, of course, because it's volunteer work, but if one could make a living out of working there, it would be a dream job for many, provided nothing else changes, which would admittedly be very unrealistic because as soon as money gets involved, things tend to get shitty. Story 29. Operating a makerspace. My first job was when I was in university and got an internship as a tech trainer at our makerspace. I was tasked with keeping up the 3D printers, the laser cutters, the mini CNC mills, and all kinds of other stuff, while also being tasked with providing training to new Makerspace members and touring college tour groups through the space. In my free time, I just sit on my laptop and build model things in CAD literally just for the fun of it. If money were never a worry for me, I'd love to return to an environment like that, even if it was a home workshop, just a place where I can work on projects and have basically any tool, traditional or advanced, I could ever need to enable me to do so. In a way, I have somewhat gotten my wish, as my current job is applications engineer for laser optics micro machining, but it also isn't quite the same, as I still have to deal with the client project and company things rather than the here's a pile of tools. While you're done with work, just let your creatively go nuts aspect that I had in the makerspace. Story 30. Even with the pay, it's objectively firefighter. You need to be strong, athletic, smart, in good health, and not to mention brave in order to even qualify. On top of that, you often need training in a lot of different skills and fields. I'm pretty sure a requirement of being a firefighter in my city is EMT training. But even with all these requirements, it's still a very competitive job to get. That's cause of the amazing compensation. It goes without saying firefighters get perfect heath benefits. Since I'm in Canada, that includes pharmaceuticals, dental, vision, physio, psych, and travel. But the real draw is the working hours and pay. Firefighters often work over 50 hours a week. Sounds rough, right? Well, that's in 24-hour increments. The typical schedule is 24 hours on, followed by 48 hours off, then 24 hours on. And unlike other jobs, firefighters get paid to sleep, work out, eat breakfast/lunch/dinner, and rest. Granted, there's the part of their job that can be extremely strenuous and life-threatening, but if you can handle that, you effectively only work 10 days a month and make anywhere from $60K to $120K per year, and those are low estimates.